Imagine a reef of gold so big, so unblemished, men would risk all to see it. Men would lose their wits thinking about it. A reef 10 miles long, 100 feet down, a reef of courts so brimming with gold, the conquistadors would have turned their ships around and crossed the scorching deserts to scratch it from the earth, had they known. Imagine a place then, so vicious, so treacherous, to cross it was worse than madness. A place the sun seared like a red furnace day after burning day, where the sweat was sucked from your bones, where salt pans glimmered like water, where bones littered the prehistoric seafloor and crumbled to dust, and water was a dream for fools and only for black men to find. A man came, an impudent, reckless man with a spark in his eye and a groan in his belly. A man born of dreamers on the Victorian goldfields after the gold was all gone. At 17 he'd paid his dues, worked on coastal steamers, fetching ladies' suitcases and bowing to gentlemen, fueling the furnaces and adjusting the steam gauges and scrubbing floors. Lasseter came to the searing centre looking for red rubies to decorate ladies' joints and lobes and throats, and to fill his treasure chest. But the stones turned out claret rocks, twinkling and shining but worthless, trinkets to gather dust on the mantle or lint in the bottom drawer. So Lasseter, he called himself Harold Bell after the preacher and poet Harold Bell Wright, like a fool went west. They wrote of Harold Bell Wright's books. I doubt if the present hour furnishes any happier symbols of the quack novel than we have in Mr. Wright. Harry Lasseter's guiding light, Mr. Wright. In 1897, and the maps show the McDonnell Ranges west from Alice all the way to the coast. Mountains to see, but no one had ever been there except the blackfellas. With a pocketful of garnets, Harry set out. Maybe there'd be water and he'd get a job on a steamer. But the mountains ran down to deserts, howling rocks and dust and grit, mulga and dingoes and burning salt pans. In the wasteland, Lasseter found no food for horses, but he did find gold. It'll be a reef, 10 miles of it, 12 foot wide, maybe 100 foot deep. 3 ounces to the ton, it's worth 200 million pounds. He took samples and marked his maps, and he went west, and when his horses succumbed, he walked, and when he succumbed, he lay. An Afghan camel driver found him. Here, have a drink. Look at the time. I've got to pray. Lasseter didn't know what was a dream. The camel driver brought him to Harding, and Lasseter showed Harding his quartz. It's worth 200 million pounds. I'm rich. I'm rich. But I ain't going back yet. That desert almost wiped me out. In the desert you see things that aren't there. The min-min lights floating. Sometimes they look like the shining eyes of a cat just hovering. The min-min near Canoona used to appear out there where there were no roads, no homesteads, nothing. They're very different to a campfire. Sometimes a bright light fading down to a weak torchlight, very dull, very far away. When I first saw the min-min, I thought it was the planet Venus, only it didn't set. It went down on the horizon and just sat there like an eye, watching. We were scared to ride towards the light because only a year ago a ringer chased it, and when his horse hit a barbed wire fence, he broke his bloody neck. Grown men are brought to tears. And then there's the heat. Heat that crouches on your head like an animal tangled there, breathing down your neck. Water. You see water shimmering in the distance, and when you make that distance, it's a salt pan or baked red rocks. That gold burnt a hole in Lasseter's brain and touched everything he did. It hammered him daily, without mercy. 3 years passed and Harry went back to the desert. He found the gold again. He took bearings from his watch and the stars to record it for time and place and posterity, and collected more white quartz. But his watch was wrong. and the reef was lost again in its own burning white vastness. He had the quartz tested in Perth, and it was sure 3 ounces to the tonne. A lot of digging, but a mountain of gold, and Ali Baba's cave, guarded by the sun and its loneliness. For years, Harry went quiet. He never stopped thinking about that reef, not through the war, not through his captaincy of a steamboat. The things I could do with that gold, the things I could do. I've seen it twice now, sitting out there in the shadow of the ranges. It's the most beautiful thing on earth. I've heard the language of angels, illumination. It's been transmitted to me. I carry a piece of that divine light around my neck. I'm looking for the truth. I am looking for the truth. And that's not easy or comfortable. In the old days, they thought there was a sea in the middle of Australia. The rivers run inland. But you know what? They all dry up to nothing. They fizzle. But there's something far more valuable than water out there. Gold. Australia's own El Dorado. That reef stretching for 10 miles through the desert, hidden, surrounded by salt pans, colossal, silent, beautiful, but revealed to me, like the splendour of a sun emerging from an eclipse. I have been chosen. Harry travelled from Oodnadatta in 1917, but they hadn't been in the desert long when he disagreed with some of the men in his party who wanted to go home. One morning he woke up and they'd gone, taken the supplies. He had to turn back. He ignored the desert peas in flower and the sun catching dried grass stems when the light goes low. They glow like gold, a flock of birds taking off through the spinifex. Lasseter never said what he would do with the money if he found that reef, but his dreams never left him. In 1929, the country was in peril again, this time financial peril from the men in the banks, and the experts sat up and listened. Lasseter set out again in 1930. Fred Blakely was the leader and Lasseter guide. A last desperate effort. From Alice, they went west to Haast's Bluff, and the men argued which way to go. Lasseter wanted south, Blakely insisted north. Further west again, Lasseter said they were 150 miles too far to the north. "You, sir, are a charlatan and a fraud and a swindler," said Blakely, and ended the journey. They left Lasseter at El Bilba, but Harry was nothing if not single-minded. A young dingo shooter named Johns accompanied him, and they left for Cartajuta, home of the great snake king Wanambi. Each night Lasseter locked himself with the guns in the truck, and Johns thought him a pretender. Lasseter returned one day after a walk and said he'd seen it again, created from the light of the divine. Johns said he was a liar, and they came to blows. Johns left and looked back down from the brow of a hill, and Lasseter was walking back out into the desert. He'd left his supplies behind. They say the Aborigines helped him. He was going blind, stumbling across salt pans in 45-degree heat, and he vanished into the desert. Or maybe he's still out there, walking by the edge of an empty lake, a withered swamp, the ground covered in salt bush and mulga, the salt dazzling like silver stars, golden-haired grass stems glowing, emus and wildflowers and birds, and best of all, water in a soak. Better than gold out there. And so that's my story. I still see it even now. Harry Lasseter, half-blind, starved, desiccated, cursed, friendless, heading over the sandhills, looking at his wristwatch, plotting the position by the stars of that reef on his map, dreaming of bullion. And at the edge of that withered swamp, galahs splashing in water, calling out to the she-oaks, telling them all about the foolish world of men.